Today we're going to discuss the subconscious and some techniques for freeing the subconscious from various negative emotions or blockages which prevent our happiness today. What we have seen throughout the years is that each of us is in some way like a split personality to some degree. That is, we have a conscious self which is quite clear that we are worthy, that we are capable, that we are safe in the world. And a conscious self which does not see reason for us to fear or become angry or to become hurt in situations or to become jealous in situations. But there seems to be another part of ourselves, which we'll call the subconscious or the inner child, which seems to have another way of feeling, another way of reacting to situations. At some point in the development of our childhood years, we began to realize that there were some feelings which it was better not to expose to other people, because they might reject us, we may become more vulnerable, we did not get a positive reaction from them. And so gradually we chose to stop showing some emotions. However, we didn't stop feeling those emotions. They are created and they are in us, but we started creating a separation between what we call the shadow and the mask. Okay? Now, we started to put into the shadow, all of our negative feelings, all of our fears, even some of our needs. If we found that there was no response to any of our needs, then we began to cover up those needs and not express them, because if we expressed them, we might be rejected. And if we were rejected, then we would feel unworthy. So we have learned to suppress into our subconscious mind feelings which we don't want to show to others, feelings which are very painful to us and which we don't want to feel. So rather than feel them, we sort of suppress them so that we don't feel them. Needs which we either consider improper needs, or needs which will not be respected, or needs which make us seem vulnerable or weak to other persons, such as the need for love, the need for affection, the need for attention. And we gradually stop expressing these needs and stop expressing these emotions. So on the one hand, we have stored in our subconscious many feelings and many needs. Also, we have stored there various positive emotions, because at some point perhaps we learned not to express our positive emotions, such as our love or our affection or our respect for some people, because perhaps we got into an antagonistic relationship or a competitive relationship. And we thought, well, if I express how much I admire this person, then that's going to go to his ego. And if I recognize that he is right or she is right sometimes, then that also. Also, men learn not to support women as much as women learn to support men. And men also learn not to express so much their positive feelings, especially if it has to do with affection or love and these kinds of feelings. So we have in the subconscious fears, other emotions, needs, desires, and even positive emotions and feelings. Another part of ourselves which often gets blocked into the subconscious is our creativity. Because we have virtually unlimited creative potential within us, but perhaps because at some point in our lives we were laughed at or rejected in some creative endeavor, we block that whole process and start saying, well, I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't draw. And we tend to create a life in which we remain only in what is familiar to us. And so our creativity becomes blocked. So gradually a separation is created between the conscious and the subconscious, between the shadow and the mask. And we put into the shadow anything that hurts us, anything that we don't want other people to see, and anything which we cannot accept ourselves. And we put into the mask everything that we believe we must have in order to get what we want from other people. So I could put into my mask the yes person, the person that always says yes and never says no, because I believe that I will lose people's love if I ever say no, that they won't love me anymore. I couldn't put in my mask the good person, the strong person, so that no one ever sees my weaknesses. On the other hand, I can put in my mask the weak person, because I believe that if I am weak or ill or I have problems, then other people will pay attention to me. Or I can put in my mask this very hard, angry person, because I believe then I can keep them away from me and protect myself. So each of us puts into his or her mask what we believe we need to put in order to protect ourselves and get what we want from the people around us. This is very similar to what we mentioned already about the roles of the Celestine prophets. Now, if you'd like to look at page 103 of your workbook, we see here a work that you could do concerning the shadow and the mask. This also corresponds to page 159 of the Greek workbook. We see here a diagram in which we have this like tunnel which comes down, and we have a mask at the end of the tunnel. And behind the mask we have the subconscious. And behind the subconscious we have the higher self, and behind the higher self we have the spirit. The idea here is that, okay, we show one part of ourselves to the world around us, or other people show to us one part of themselves. We're on page 103. Behind that, however, there is this whole subconscious world which we are not expressing. And behind that subconscious world is our higher self, our soul or spirit, which has very positive spiritual qualities. The problem is that usually on this path we need to go through the subconscious and clean up the subconscious. This is called catharsis, to clean up the subconscious in order to get in touch with the higher self and to be actually one person. Otherwise, we are going to be one person who is reasonable, who is clear, who is peaceful, who is loving. But we're going to have this other part of ourself which is still fearing, still hurting, still angry, or in some way blocked or obstructed. You see? So the whole purpose here of this work of catharsis is being able to gradually clean up or clean out the subconscious in this way, so that the work that we do on the conscious level does not create this split personality syndrome, which we see in many spiritual people. That is, people who have obtained much knowledge, they've read many books, they've done many seminars, and they could teach very well all the spiritual truths. But when you touch their buttons, they get angry, they get fearful, they feel jealous, they are egocentric. So in order to avoid this split personality syndrome on the spiritual path, we at Harmonic Jesuit, at least, believe that we need to do work also in cleaning the subconscious. Now, we're not going to do that work in this seminar. I'm just explaining to you what you can do. We have special weekend and summer seminars in which you stay in our retreat center and do this work, because it's not something that you can do and then go home and face your family and face your work. It's something that you need to have time and space for these things to come out and heal. So we do a 10-day seminar, an 8-day seminar. We also do a 2-day seminar on working on bringing these things up. It's not something that can be done in 2 hours. It needs quite a few hours to work on. Now these are some questions here, however, that you can begin this process with, at least intellectually. What have you covered in your shadow for others not to see? So what are those parts of yourselves which you prefer for others not to see? Your fears, your desires, your needs, your anger, your hurt, your jealousy, your love, your admiration, your strength, your weakness. I've heard some women say, I can't show my strength to my husband because he has a problem with it. Okay? So we could even hide positive parts of ourselves. Okay? Secondly, what do you believe must appear in your mask so that you will accept and so others will accept and love you? How do you want the others to perceive you and describe you? Okay, so what is it that you think you have to have in your mask in order to be accepted, loved, or respected by the people around you? Now let's look at these questions down below. Active listening for the shadow and the persona, the mask. The shadow. What is it that exists in your shadow which you have difficulty to share with others or accept in yourself? For each of these, which are the beliefs which stop you from sharing or accepting these aspects of yourself? What do you believe about your fear, or your anger, or your jealousy, or your desire, or your love, or your respect, which makes you find it difficult to show that? Number 3, what are the childhood experiences or messages which have created in your subconscious or conscious mind these beliefs which cause you to hide these aspects of yourself? What did you experience in the past which made it painful for you, what caused you to come to the conclusion that I must not show weakness, or I must not show fear, or anger, or disagreement, or I must never say no, or whatever that may be? I heard a woman this weekend in the seminar we did, and she says, I have difficulty saying yes. And now analyzing it, she realized that saying yes meant being in control. So she kept the no in her mask. She was a no person, you see. She thought she was protecting her freedom by being able to say always no. Whereas other people believe that they're always going to be loved by always saying yes. So we have all kinds of ways in which we react to realities. We have to see our way of reacting. And the fourth question is, what do you want to do about your shadow? Is there anything in your shadow that you would like to bring to the surface in order to be more truthful? Because when we have relationships, then people, and we have the shadow and the mask, and we keep up the shadow and the mask in the relationship, then that person doesn't have a relationship with us. That person has a relationship with the mask. And this is why usually we let go of the shadow and the mask when we're with our very close, in a very close relationship. That means having a close relationship. Otherwise, you really can't talk about a close relationship in which you're keeping up the mask and the shadow. Of course, you're going to keep it up with the taxi driver, with your distant friends, perhaps. But the wonderful thing would be to be able to be ourselves totally in every situation. Now let's look at the mask. What are the questions about that? What do you feel should exist in your mask or your showcase for others to see in order for them to respect, love, accept, and desire you? Which of these burden, bore, or restrict you the most? You see, there may be many aspects in our mask which are us. That I believe that I should be a kind person, but I am a kind person, and it doesn't cost me any energy to be a kind person. So that's not a problem. So we're looking for the aspects of our mask which tire us, that I'm making an effort to be kind. I'm making an effort to say yes. I'm not doing what I really feel, what I really think. So it's not a problem if there are parts of our mask which we believe we must have but are natural to us. We're not concerned about those natural qualities. Okay? Number 3. What are the beliefs which make you maintain these despite the energy waste or self-repression? So what do I believe which makes me continue trying to appear as something which I am not? What do I believe which makes me do this? 4. What are the experiences or messages from the past that have led you to these convictions? What have I experienced in the past which causes me to believe that it's just that I must be this way? One of the most common, I guess the two most common masks are, I am strong and I don't need any help. Many people put on the role of the strong person. Or I'm not hurt when I'm really hurting, you know. The strong person who's not hurt. And the other is the yes person. Yes, but I really don't want to, you know. So these are the two main masks that burden us, that tire us in life. Okay, so we may want to look as to where we're not sharing our pain or sharing our fear or our weakness, and where we are not sharing the fact that there are some things we do not like to do, we prefer not to do. There may be many other things, but these are the most popular in our masks. Okay? And the 5th question is, what do you want to do about your mask? Okay, this is something I'd like you to try to answer these questions for next week. Observe yourselves during the week and see what is coming up that you're not sharing, and what is it that you're trying to put on in life, because it is tiring. It is extremely tiring. Now, there's another factor here. It requires energy for us to keep those feelings which are not expressing under control. It's as if, you know, if a piece of wood, a splinter, gets into your skin, the first thing that your body does is to surround it and create a cyst around it so that its presence will not affect the rest of the body. So the first thing our energy body needs to do, when I have the emotion of fear or of anger or of hurt, is to surround it by an energy field so that I'm not experiencing it, so that I can focus on my work, so that I can function in the world. I mean, if we didn't do this, we would be unable to function, because we would be like little children who are always crying, always being angry, unable to function. So naturally, we created this mechanism of encompassing these feelings in these energy fields. But this requires a continual amount of energy, and this eventually leads to psychosomatic illness. So it starts hitting on my intestines, and I have colitis, or I start having headaches, or I start having arthritis, or rheumatism, or even cancer, because all of my energy is going to maintaining this emotional balance by suppressing and ignoring feelings that are within me, and that lowers the effectiveness of my immune system, of my defense system. So one result of this is that our energy is lowered, and this is what we experience when we do this catharsis work, how much more energy we have afterwards. And we realize that how much energy it requires to ignore our pain and to ignore our fear or ignore our energy. It's like having, you know, we're having a war over here and we're having a war over here. I have to keep all of this in place so that I can function in the world. Whereas by doing some catharsis and letting that come out, then I no longer need to expend any energy in keeping that in place, because it's freed. So one result is the loss of energy. Another result is the psychosomatic illness. A third result is that we become hypersensitive to certain stimuli which create emotional mechanisms within us without being able to understand why. Why am I so upset about what this person said? logically I should not be upset. But what we're unaware of is that we have an unhealed wound. And that when you touch an unhealed wound, it hurts. When you touch healed skin, it does not hurt. You see? So we're not allowing this wound cannot heal until it comes into the light of day. As long as it's covered up, it's going to fester. So this wound has to be brought up to the surface in order to be healed. It may be painful to bring it up to the surface. And I may not enjoy the idea of dealing with this emotion. But there's no logical alternative. I mean, it's like saying, yes. It's like saying, I don't want to deal with my subconscious because it makes me suffer. And this is like saying, I know there's a fire in my bedroom, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm just going to live in the living room. Yeah, but that fire is gradually going to go into the hallway, and eventually it's going to come into the living room. And suddenly I'm going to be ill. And it's always going to come into the living room when someone touches me in that place. When someone does something which reminds me subconsciously of the original event, which caused the pain or caused the anger or caused the fear. Okay? So we become overly sensitive. Also, it becomes very difficult to create close love relationships because whenever anyone touches our buttons, we react through these emotional mechanisms, and we're not able to control ourselves. That is, we are robots who have been programmed by these experiences in the past, and we have no control because the mechanisms which are causing us to react are not conscious. And afterwards we wonder, well, why was I giving so much importance to these words or to this action? I'm not in danger. My self-worth is not in danger here. So, but then the reason I can't solve the problem is because the problem is not in the conscious mind. It's in the subconscious. And I have no idea what it is. When I myself, and many people who have worked with me, have realized after 20 years and 25 years what it was. Sometimes these things takes many years of inner work for them to come up and for us to realize what exactly happened at what age, which causes us to be so sensitive or so attached to a certain kind of behavior or situation. So what are we interested in doing in the catharsis and in the healing of the subconscious? First of all, we want to gradually come in contact with the subconscious and with its contents. With any pain that is there, with any fear, any guilt. I neglected to mention guilt. Guilt is also a very powerful emotion in the subconscious which affects us. Any anger. I always say that these are the four main things we're looking for: anger, fear, hurt, and guilt. Other emotions also, but these are the main ones. The second is to accept the part of ourselves which feels this way. Because what we tend to do is we tend to reject that part of ourselves. The first step is coming in contact with it, and the second step is accepting it. Accept that there is a part of myself which fears. It's okay. Accept that there's a part of myself which is angry. It's okay. Okay? So that's the second step. The third step is to express it. Now, this is a process which can take many forms. We can express it, first of all, through in emotional ways such as crying, or even laughing, or beating a pillow, or any kind of movement, or making any kind of sounds, any kind of words or through shouting, anything that comes to us. So one way is through various types of emotional expression. Another way, which is easier in the beginning, is to write what we are feeling. Many people feel more safe. They feel safer with writing than they do with crying or hitting a pillow. So we could write about the feelings. Another way is to express them creatively through dance, through drawing or painting, through poetry, through theater. So in some way express those feelings in some creative way. Now, there is a process in which we call the process of catharsis, which works more on an energy level. And what is that? I relax and I become aware of the part of my body in which this emotion is stored. Now that emotion is attached or has gathered around it a certain amount of energy which has the quality of that emotion. And so what do? I allow that energy to expand, and I allow that feeling to expand as I observe the phenomena which are created by its movement. Now usually this starts somewhere in the abdomen, where we keep most of our emotional tension. It begins to flow up, becomes a pain in the chest, and then a knot in the throat, and then a headache, and then eventually flows out through the top of the head. It could also flow out through the arms or through the hands, especially through movement. And this is why we use dance quite a bit in our catharsis work. So the whole idea is doing the opposite of deep relaxation. In deep relaxation, we would seek to remove ourselves from any feelings or from any thoughts, whereas the catharsis technique is to go into any feelings and allow them to expand and to fill my being so that I stop being an observer of that and become a vehicle for its expression. Now, ways in which we have discovered that we can help this energy expand and release is by breathing deeply. By deep breathing, we can get the energy moving, and we sort of get out of our minds and more into the feeling and let the feeling release. This often brings about crying or tears. Through making sounds, any kind of sounds which express the nature of what we are feeling. Through taking positions or making movements which express, as if you're doing pantomime, that is, if someone were to look at us and they saw the position of our body and saw the expression on our face and saw the movements of our body, that they could tell that we were feeling guilt or anger or hurt or whatever we were feeling. So that it's like getting consciously having the body move into that state, even though I'm not identified with it yet. But by moving physically into this, that helps us to connect with the emotion. So we do this kind of work also with the body and with the facial expressions. Now this energy could be released by crying, by yawning, by shaking, by spasmodic movements. And all of these are not to be worried about if they come about. I mean, they are very natural ways in which the body is releasing this energy and coming into its balance. And you feel very wonderful after you've gone through this kind of catharsis. It really cleans out the system. And I think most of us need it. But I would not suggest that you try doing it by yourselves at first. If you can either come to one of our seminars or ask one of our group facilitators to work with you on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 private sessions. And then after you've gotten the idea of it, and we see that there's nothing, really horrible in there, then you can begin working by yourselves. Another way of, now once we have done this release, then we are in a state of emptiness, and then we can begin to analyze and then we can begin to bring truth into our mind. You see, otherwise, what we're doing is, when we're bringing truths into our minds and changing our belief system, without also doing catharsis, it's like polishing the floor without sweeping and washing it. So what do? We just encase the dirt into the floor. So when I start saying, I am a soul in evolution and I have no fear, and there's another part of me which is just very fearful and very hurt and very angry, I'm creating a split personality. And at some point in my evolutionary process, this is going to come out. And if I say I have no desires because I'm a spiritual being and I haven't worked with those desires, then at some point they're going to come out, you see. So we believe that we need to do this parallel with the psychological work that we're doing with the analysis. But once we have released, then the analysis and the bringing of the truths is much more effective, because we have created an empty space. It's not like trying to put water into a glass that already is full. Now we have an empty glass, and the water can go in. So the truths can go in even to the parts of ourselves which we're resisting. Otherwise, though we believe in the truth, but we have autonomous sections of ourselves which are separate from that truth and are functioning according to our childhood programming. We may consciously believe that I am a soul in the process of evolution, but I have this subconscious part which says, I am a very vulnerable child. So then we go on to analysis and to working with truth. That could be done through the questionnaires, through the group discussions that we're having, through seminars, through keeping a diary. All of this work with the conscious mind is parallel to the catharsis work. Other techniques that we use is dialoguing. Dialoguing is when I speak with, I allow two parts of myself to speak with each other. This we do when we have inner conflict. So I have one part of myself which is not afraid. I have another part which is afraid. And so I speak with the part of myself which feels the fear, or which feels the anger, or feels the jealousy, and I have a discussion with that part of myself. I don't reject it. I try to understand it, because the big mistake that we make is in rejecting our emotional self. Rather than accepting it, communicating with it, and educating it. That part of myself does not need to be rejected, because its very presence is based on self-doubt. That is, I feel jealousy because I doubt myself. I am angry because I doubt myself. I am hurt because I doubt myself. So when I reject myself for feeling these emotions, then I just increase the cause. So what I need to do is to accept that part of myself and have a discussion with it. And this could be done in writing, or it could be done with 2 chairs or 2 pillows, in which I get up and change positions. One moment I speak from myself which is not jealous, and then I speak from myself which is jealous, or not fearful and fearful, not angry and angry. And I try to come to some understanding between those parts. Another technique that we use is called psychodrama, in which someone else helps us, usually one of our group facilitators or a psychologist, who will play the part of a person with whom we have a problem. And they may play the part of our mother or our father or our spouse or our child. And they try to help us to realize what's going on in us by asking us questions, but coming from that role. That is, we imagine that they are that other person. And this is a very also helpful and powerful technique, psychodrama. We also do what is called reverse psychodrama, in which the group, the facilitator or the psychologist plays us, and we play the other person whom we have the problem with. And we do this reverse psychodrama in order to help the person realize what the other person is feeling and what the other person needs. Because you have to get into the position of the other person to answer the questions that the psychologist or the facilitator is asking. So another technique is reverse psychodrama, in which we become the other person. Another technique which we use much later in the process of helping somebody, if they seem very blocked and they're not able to get in touch with their emotions, we use this with very intellectual people, people who have used their mind very much to get away from their emotions, is the rebirthing technique, in which we do this rapid breathing process which stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and brings emotions to the surface. This can go on for an hour or even an hour and a half. It's called rebirthing because many people experience their birth, the process of their birth, which is considered one of the most traumatic experiences of our lives. We're coming out of the womb into the cold, very brightly lit room, and coming out of that sense of oneness and that total protection into a world which is quite hard and full of other kinds of emotions, you see. So rebirthing, however, is not exclusively for experiencing our birth process. It brings up all kinds of feelings which are suppressed. Another way that we try to help people work out the catharsis is through activity. If someone is having difficulty with very intense emotions, we might even avoid working with the subconscious until they feel more balanced. And we would suggest that they do work therapy, that they would have something which occupies themselves, and preferably in a garden, working with the earth, or working with clay, or working with anything with their hands, which would help them get out of their minds and become grounded in some way. We would not do these techniques with a person who is already very emotionally imbalanced. First, we would want them to find a certain amount of balance in their lives, and then move on to searching into the subconscious, if we choose to do that in that case. Another way is, another form of work which we find very helpful is serving others. We believe very much in selfless service as a way for a person to find his inner peace. That is, forgetting himself for a few hours a week and offering something to someone who is in need. It could be an orphan, it could be an elderly person, it could be a poor person, a blind person, a paralyzed person, an ill person, or a lonely person, or it could even be serving nature, helping to plant trees, protect the environment, anything which expands us beyond the narrow limits of our ego-centered lives. Because our main problem is our ego-centeredness. I mean, it's interesting that Thomas Merton, recent philosopher, said that depression is the height of self-indulgence. That in order to be depressed, you have to be over-concerned about yourself. Am I getting what I want? Am I not getting what I want? Are other people loving me or other people not loving me? It is a focusing on ourselves. Whereas if a person says, are these other people okay? Is this person okay? Does this person have what he needs? Then all of this disappears, you see. And especially when we see how lucky we are in relationship to 90% of humanity. I'm crying about something someone said, but this person doesn't even have legs, or this person doesn't even have food, doesn't even see, you see. So serving, it also can be an escape. Someone can also use that as an escape from their problems and get so involved with others that they're not at all aware of themselves. We're not interested in that either. We're interested in a balanced life in which we are working on ourselves, but that we're also expanding beyond ourselves. Another technique which we use is called the transformation of the various aspects of the subconscious. We do the transformation of the physical problem, the transformation of the emotion, or the transformation of the belief. We mentioned this in our class about relaxation. And what is the idea here? I let my emotion take a form in my mind, And then I speak with that form, and I ask this form, this emotion that is part of myself, which has this emotion, how and when were you born in me? When did you start to exist within me? At that point, we may get some messages, some images from our childhood years, or we may hear a voice saying something which explains to us when we started feeling fear, or anger, or jealousy, or hurt. And then we ask this part of ourselves, what can I do to help you? What do you need from me? How can I help this part of my being? Then I start feeling a closeness to this part of myself, sending it love, sending it light, allowing it to be permeated by light and love. And at this point, usually what happens is it begins to transform. It could disappear, it could be transformed into this raggedy little child, into this very strong and healthy, happy young child, or from a raggedy old chicken into an eagle, or I've heard all kinds of transformations taking place. Or it might just become light and disappear, or the form may change, or it may become smaller, or anything could happen in this case. Then I embrace that part of myself, and I love it completely. And then if necessary, I can then explain to that part of myself the truths which it needs to understand in order to become free of its emotion. Because negative emotions are the result of my not being aware of some truths, of my taking things, my identifying myself with attachments, with my belief that I cannot be happy, that I'm losing my security, that I'm losing my self-worth, that I'm losing my freedom. Now, another form of help, which some people feel inclined to and other people do not, is prayer, chanting, meditation, all forms of spiritual, inner spiritual work, which can help us on the one hand free ourselves from the negative emotions and bring light and divine energy into there. And on the other hand, chanting can also be a form of release, chanting with other people, or singing also in general can be a form of release. And then in the final stages, we begin to work with spiritual truths, which we bring more and more into our minds. I am spirit. I am safe. I am worthy. I love and accept myself as I am. And working with these truths, this begins to transform our belief system. Okay, so what I explained to you today was a parallel process, which we are not going to work on in the context of this course, but which I encourage you to get involved with when you feel you are ready, at least as a checking, as a scan to see if there's anything in there. I'm sure there is. We all have much to be released from the subconscious. I leave that in your hands, but what I would like you to ask you for the next time, at least to work on the work intellectually on the concept of the shadow and the mask, and try to answer those questions. What are you hiding in the shadow? What are you keeping in the mask which is tiring you? And I encourage you at some point when you feel ready to begin to work on this catharsis of the subconscious mind. Okay, so before we break up into our groups, is there anything that you would like to ask or say about this parallel work of the catharsis, cleaning out the subconscious, bringing up the contents of the subconscious and releasing it, and then replacing it with light, replacing it with truth, with reason? Anything that you'd like to ask or say? Okay, you have something? Yes, I agree. My belief is you can't really change anything you cannot accept. The moment you don't accept it, it becomes more deep-rooted, and you start a war, and it usually wins. So once I accept my weakness, I accept my fear, accept my anger, then I can begin to work with it. Then I can begin to understand it, to communicate with it, to love it, and to educate it. Because what it needs is to be educated, not to be rejected. Exactly. And this is... No, you could be create a lot of beautiful things. Because if we're changing positively, then this is helping other people to change positively. It may create some confusion for them, but that, in the long run, it may create some disturbances temporarily, but I'm sure that the long-term result will be very beautiful. Mm. Yeah, there is also clinical depression. Yes. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
But she has depression, she talks a lot about
Mm.
battling for years.
There are, yes, there does seem to be a chemical aspect of depression. Mm. Mm. But serving does seem to be a good solution. Having meaning in life.
Well, that's all she's got.
Mm.
Her life is bad.
Mm.
That's why she does this work.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
It's got better.
Mm. Okay, anything else before we close the machines and speak among us? Okay. Okay, so we can close up.